we're ready to rock then, aren't we, for episode 10? Where did that go?
I was going to say 10 weeks, 20 weeks.
20 weeks.
Have flown by, haven't they? It's again, this week's Measuring Up podcast weather report, we started in the icy blast of Siberian freeze, and we're ending it in a bit of a meltdown, aren't we? It's stiflingly hot at the moment.
Literally, even Newcastle's warm at the minute.
Goodness me.
And I was just looking at the weather forecast, and apparently every part of the UK had hit 30 degrees yesterday.
Glorious.
Which is just unheard of in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's just gorgeous weather at the minute.
Yeah, it is absolutely beautiful. I've been, as ever, been out to the workshop early this morning, and it's just that perfect kind of 14, 15 degrees at the moment. Clear blue skies, bright sunshine, slightly fresh, just ever so slightly fresh. So not stiflingly hot or muggy. So it's just, well, it's going to get sticky and horrible later, but, just now it's lovely.
The hosepipe bans will be kicking in soon.
I'm going to say, yeah, it's as surely as night follows day, we'll get, shower with a friend or whatever to cut down on your water wastage, yeah. So how have you been? You got your studio desk all up and running?
Yeah, studio desks are all done and dusted. What a difference. Honestly, just having a decent work area, it's just made a huge difference. And I've kind of used that time to really attack a lot of paperwork and online stuff that's been getting neglected over the last couple of years, to be honest.
Yeah.
There's so many things I want to try and plough on with and get done before I start getting absorbed into another big project.
Yes.
And so I'm just gradually getting through loads of back-end stuff. It's really boring. As I say, mainly web stuff, but YouTube stuff as well, going through old YouTube videos, and there's videos out there. Some of them were not appropriate for my channel, just in terms of they were a bit even too random for my channel, because my channel's pretty random.
Eclectic, I think, is the word.
But it was there was a couple of videos on there that were just, I kind of I don't know. In the early days, when you're just looking to get as much content out there as possible, and you put all sorts on. I mean, I've still got a few videos that I've left on, like me changing the brake bulb in my wife's Ford Fiesta, but they tend to do quite well, so I don't mind doing the odd thing like that.
Yeah, bizarre. Yeah, I like that. I like it when guys have their first videos on. Jimmy DeResta's got all his first videos on. So right just after YouTube started, it's all, you look at his basement shop in New York, and it looks really spacious because he's got nothing in it compared to what it was like when he left. It's rammed full of stuff.
Oh, I agree. I think it's fun to look back.
It is. It is.
At your first videos, I do always say to people, don't delete your old content, no matter how bad it is. It's all right pruning the odd video just to get your whole channel kind of in line, but don't delete old videos just because you think they're not very good, because you're always going to think that. In 2 years' time, we'll think that the videos that we're doing now aren't very good, and you're always kind of pushing to the next level of YouTube-ness and production. And
yeah, well, as we said in the last episode, being pushed to do better is not a bad thing, whether that's through competition or what you see on YouTube, what you see other people doing, or through your clients and designers pushing you to do better work. It produces, great content, great product, whether it's the furniture you're making or the videos. It's not a bad thing, doing better. It was one of the topics of show topics, and maybe we'll keep it for next season. About improving, doing better. Yeah,
it's kind of that constant striving for perfection, but not
that will drive you crazy. But pursuit of excellence, I think.
Yeah, not letting it get in the way of actually getting the job done, I think is
exactly
the key to it.
Yeah, talking of getting the job done. You put a midweek video out this week about all your bits and pieces that you carry out. That you carry with you for carrying out handyman type jobs. I know you don't do much of that sort of stuff anymore, but it brought home just the amount of stuff you need to carry with you for all those little incidental bits and pieces.
I was only putting up a couple of pictures. It was funny after our show last week, and you were saying that you were getting dragged off to put pictures up, and literally within like a day of that podcast going out, one of my regular customers got in touch and said, "Oh, can you come and put some pictures up for us?" And I was like, "Oh, go on."
Hard to say no.
I tried to say no, and I couldn't do it.
Yeah,
I just couldn't say. And it's like, oh, well, you know, I've got a bit of a. I'm supposed to be doing paperwork and catching up on other stuff, but go on. It'll only take us a couple of hours, and
did it?
And it did, and it didn't take long. It was like a bunch of pictures, but it was one of these awkward ones where it was a whole row of pictures that all had to be exactly the same height, and all of them had string on the back. So we're trying to get pictures exactly the same height when they've got string rather than kind of
a solid fixing. Yeah.
But they were too small for any sort of solid hook type thing on the back. And but yeah, got all that done, which I don't know. I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I guess it was a nice change from doing complicated stuff.
Yeah, it is quite nice to do something simple and straightforward sometimes.
Yeah,
and to get it completed, you know, they're on the wall, boom, you're done.
Exactly.
Whereas nothing hanging on, nothing hanging around. And you see the finished thing as well, because so often with the stuff I make, it goes off to be sprayed or whatever. And then it gets delivered to the end clients, and I never see it. You know, it's the last time I see it is a bit of unfinished MDF and wrapped up in brown paper, getting thrown into the back of somebody's van. You know,
exactly the same here. There's a kind of a vloggy video that I've kind of got half filmed. Do you remember when I was doing? There was like an understairs cupboard job a few coming on for must be a month or so ago, and I was hoping that they would send us some pictures of it all painted, and I've been holding out doing the follow-up to that video until I get the final pictures of it, and I don't think they're going to materialise. It's like I don't want to pester them too many times.
It is such a shame, isn't it?
But it could just be that they've not had time to paint it yet, or because they're probably doing it themselves. Or
they could get you back with your superior roller technique to do it. Now you've shown you can get spray quality finish from a roller, you know. They're going to be all over you, man.
I just get so many comments saying, "Oh, you should have sprayed it. Oh, you should have sprayed it." And it's like, well, there's, as you well know, there are trade-offs to spraying.
There are indeed.
And for smaller jobs, it's not really practical, and most people can't tell the difference unless you put them side by side, or they're specifically asking for a spray painted finish, which is another whole...
It's really interesting. I've just done this week. I've done another bunket, big box with sliding doors this time and birch ply. So I got that done last week. Because of this weather, the lacquer wasn't drying very fast, and I wanted to get, you know, a good solid firm finish before I could get it delivered. So got that ready to go. I couldn't get in until Tuesday to deliver and install that. So Monday afternoon, I got all that out of the way. It was all, let it dry nice and firm over the weekend, and got that wrapped up ready for delivery, got that out of the way. And for the rest of the day, I've had a silly little job. I've got 3 kitchen cabinet doors and a bit of toe board to replace. I painted a kitchen and did a low-level kitchen refurb for somebody about 5 years ago. And around the sink, it just gets a bit battered and bruised because they're not the most careful of people. So I went and had a look. I said, look, you know, those doors are too far gone. I can do something with those, but these ones need replacing, and we'll take out that section and we'll put a different toe board in there and all that sort of stuff. So I had 3 little doors and a bit of toe board to do, and that's the classic spraying dilemma. You know, it's just that kind of silly little job. Is it worth setting up the sprayer to do that? And this is why I got the one I did, to be honest, because it is. And again, we're jumping the gun a little bit. There will be a video out on this, but basically, from a standing start, and I'm not really fully set up for this yet, even after 4 months. You know, I've cranked the big job out and doing what I needed to do. But even with the very rudimentary kind of ramshackle spray booth it took me less than 5 minutes to set up, and it took me less than 10 minutes to spray 3 doors and a toe board. I mean, it's so fast. It is so quick.
What about clean up and stuff afterwards? So
clean up was next to nothing. Again, that particular gun is very fast. You just kind of rinse it through with three pots of water.
So you literally just kind of empty the pot of paint, clean it out.
Don't even do that. Just they have what's called a flex liner. So it's a squishy little pot, which is semi-disposable. You know, I just keep if it's something like primer, I keep that paint in it, or if it's a paint I use a lot, just put a rubber glove over the top, latex glove or whatever, and that'll stay active for as long as it's good.
Right.
And then you can just pop that back in, just rinse the gun through with water.
How do you get the water into the gun then? Do you have another pot that you put the water in?
Yeah, I mean, these are less than £1 each. You buy them by the pack of 25, and just, as I say, they're sort of semi-disposable.
Clever.
So you just got another one with water in, and then in the final rinse, you put a bit of fabric softener in. No, it's a pump guard, and that stays in and just protects the pump. Because obviously the pump is the most important part of these little guns.
What is that? Some sort of oil, or what? It's just some sort of lubricant.
You know, I don't even know what it is. Looks like antifreeze, to be honest, but yeah, it's some kind of protective coating.
I must admit, I mean, I am very tempted, and I keep on thinking, could I come up with some sort of way of putting some sort of screen around the whole sides of my, like a giant shower screen.
Well, stay tuned, because there'll be a video out before too long about a portable spray booth and possible filtration as well. You know, the story is not over yet. Yeah, I mean, in the comments, I've had loads of people saying, "Oh, you know, take it outside, do all the usual stuff." One guy said he has a shower curtain rail running around at ceiling height, and he just sort of pulls a shower curtain around, which is actually quite a clever idea.
I do like the sound of that, because yeah, there's definitely pros and cons, but if you can get stuff up and running that quickly.
Absolutely. And just to follow on from that, these doors had to be hand painted in the end, rollered, because that was the finish on the original kitchen. And as much as my hand finishing is, you know, pretty good, the spray finish is so much better.
But I was going to say, often you do have to match it to what's already there. And if you've got 3 doors that are immaculately spray painted next to doors that are rollered, you are going to notice the difference. It's a different finish. It is a different finish.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, in those situations, you would hand finish it, but you can spray prime it.
Yeah,
you know, spray primer was literally 10 minutes, less. So yeah. Also, the overspray seems to be much more contained. When I gave the gun a full clean down, I actually pulled the whole nozzle assembly off, and there was an awful lot of paint around the inside. So I don't think it's been sealing properly. There's a little rubber seal on the inside, which is where the tip connects to it. So I don't think that was sealing properly. Pretty sure I didn't touch that. All I did was turn it from, you know, vertical spray pattern to horizontal occasionally. So I think it's not being connected right, which might explain why I've been getting much more overspray than other people seem to suggest. You know, the story's not done yet. However, I'm going to finish this series fairly soon, because I think it's running on a bit, and we'll come back to the, you know, semis. Permanent spray booth at a later video. We'll get this job done, because, you know, the videos are coming through on a weekly basis, and at the end of it, I'll do a quick review of the Graco, my opinions of it, and then later in the year, I'll do a comparison between the Graco and a couple of cheaper sprayers, and also a little. I've got it's all up in my head. I know exactly what I want to do as a temporary spray booth, as a collapsible spray booth. Yeah,
I am looking forward to that. As I say, I would love to be set up for spraying, but I think if I'm going to do it, I want something that's going to be a permanent solution, if you know what I mean. So something that isn't temporarily putting up cloths and taking them down and stuff, which I know you've had to do that for this job.
Neither of us have the space to have a permanent solution, unfortunately.
No, but by a permanent solution, I mean like a track that is permanently mounted in the ceiling or something like that.
Right, yeah. I'm working on a collapsible or fold-up booth that is big enough to take an 8-foot length of whatever.
Yeah.
So,
because there's a number of ways you could do it, isn't there? You could have something that somehow comes up from the floor and rollers down.
Full James Bond, absolutely. Yeah.
Some sort of motorized system.
You're getting carried away, Andy.
I've thought of all of these. Some sort of motorised partition that comes down the workshop.
Yes, that'd be cool. Or just, have a separate space would be nice, wouldn't it?
Well, that would be great. I'm wondering as well, in terms of air filtration, would my dust air cleaner be any good for spraying? Or
possibly. The problem is that obviously paint particles are going to clog the filter faster, so you might need an extra wraparound filter around it. And
presumably they're going to clog the filter and be very hard to get out the filter as well.
Impossible, yeah. It's the filters become disposable. But paint booth filter, you can buy it on eBay by the meter.
So I could probably just wrap that around it while spraying, and that would probably do it.
The problem that I've had, and one of the things that came up in the comments that a lot of people have said, is that it's actually entirely possible that I get some very high readings on my air quality monitor, and it's possible that the spray itself is actually just kicking up dust in the air, and of course, if can't say it doesn't measure just paint particles; it measures the air quality. I think it was fairly contained, so I don't think that's a problem. But of course, if you've got a fan at either end of this booth, pushing air out, that may well kick dust up into the air, which again is the last thing you need. You really need to be extracting the air out of that room into somewhere else, filtering it along the way, and that's going to be the challenge for me.
As we've said before, sometimes the act of just walking into the workshop can throw it past the 1,000 mark on,
Absolutely, it does. And in fact, I've been using my table saw a lot the last couple of days, which is unusual for me. And that's terrible for dust. Dust collection is shocking on that. And we're getting very high base levels at the moment, so I've really got to let everything settle down and then just hoover everything out.
Yeah, well, that's on my to-do list as well. I need to give my workshop a proper deep clean. It hasn't had a deep clean for probably 6 months or so, and there's just dust in places where, you've just got to move everything to get to it.
Just everywhere.
Yeah. The challenges of dust in a workshop, but
absolutely,
that's why we love it.
So my banquette was interesting.
Yeah. So are you all done on the? It's a big job, completely finished.
More or less, yeah. I've got I managed to leave a rail bag, my festival rails behind.
Oh.
So I've got to pop over there this afternoon to get that. A 2-hour pop. I've got a kitchen door to change, which won't be until later in the year. End of July, beginning of August, and that's it for now. There might be some painting later on, stuff they shelved because of time pressures. But yeah, essentially it's done.
Fantastic.
Done and got the money, as my granddad used to say.
When are we going to see? I'm dying to see some pictures of the finished job.
The finished job. I've put a few snippets up on Instagram. If you follow me on Instagram at 10 Minute Workshop, you'll see some of those and the install videos. I've got a video coming up today of the final build of the big shelves. I've got a cabinet build next week, and then we get into the installs. And I haven't got a huge amount to show, but there's a few little video snippets. Plus, there'll be photos of the finished job. So yeah, it looked fantastic. I've got to say, it looked really good.
I'm looking forward to seeing it.
So anyway, this birch ply banquette was an interesting one. Sliding doors, all. Clear lacquer birch ply, so really nice to do a bit of plywood instead of MDF. But it's not huge. It was 8 foot long, 24/40, about 700 deep, 460 or so high, on a low plinth. But it's in a basement kitchen. It's going under the stairs, and it's too big and too heavy to manhandle in. So I had to go in flat, and I used the relatively new Domino Connectors for this. The bottom you could domino in and screw from underneath, but the top section had to be unmarred, and I didn't want to get into gluing and clamping this thing. So I use these the Domino connectors. I've had them for a while. There'll be a video out on those in due course. Again, I wanted to do a sort of a deeper dive rather than I just got the box, here's what's in it kind of thing, because they're interesting. They've been out for it's a knockdown fixing basically, and these have been out for the bigger Domino for a while, and they've just introduced them for the smaller DF500. And they worked extremely well for the banquette. I used them on the big job as well for a laundry room, and they didn't quite do what I wanted them to on that job. They were fine, it worked. I don't know if you get into this, but sometimes you have to build something into a very tight space, and you've got to construct it within the space. So there's no flex. You can't move the sides of the carcass out of the way to get a screw in there or anything like that. You've got to offer the top of the carcass up and then fix it in somehow. Now the Domino connectors are 25mm long. They have a 25mm metal spike, if you like, that sticks out of one side, that goes into a slot on the other, and you screw a thing up into them. It's much more obvious when you see it, my poor explanation. But basically you still need at least 25mm of travel, of flex in the carcass to be able to get these things connected. So they didn't quite do what I was doing. Some stuff in a laundry room, and the space was tight, and it didn't quite do what I wanted there. So if you're doing that, then the Lamello make a fancy biscuit jointer called the Zeta P, and there's a fixing called a Clamex, which does that. You can offer it up absolutely flush against the carcass sides. Flick a switch effectively, and it locks in place. Very clever, very neat. Comes at a price, as you might imagine with Lamello. But the Domino connectors worked extremely well. The downside of them is that they're quite expensive, and you need to be quite accurate with them. You've got about 0.5 mil of wiggle room, and I had a grid of 16 of these spread over a 2440 by 700 array. And much to my surprise, they went in absolutely perfectly. They all slotted together.
Oh, well, there you go. Wouldn't doubt it for a second, Peter.
Absolutely fantastic. It's the easiest build, the easiest install I've done for a long time.
And I gather that would mean you can completely flat pack it and then just build it on site.
Yep.
Or...
Yeah. And you can dry fit it to a finished standard as well, completely without clamps or anything. So
interestingly, my video on Saturday is all about insert nuts, threaded inserts. So
okay,
I'm doing a little tips video about that because I needed them for my studio desk, and I thought, that'll make a useful little video. And there's hardly any videos out there about how to use them.
Interesting. Okay,
different league to the sort of Festool knockdown fixings and some of the other fancier fixings that are out there, but still useful fixings to have. And I don't see many people actually using knockdown fixings at all on the projects on YouTube. You hardly ever see people use knockdowns. It's all glued and screwed and nailed and all sorts. But there's a lot of advantages to going down that route. Yeah,
and again, it's mostly for ease of construction, and doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be taken apart and moved. It's for the convenience of putting stuff together. I was quite impressed by the Domino Connect. There's another one out there called Domino Fix, which is a third-party fixing, which seems interesting. Neither of them are cheap. The Domino Connectors, each fixing, so to connect an L type fixing, so a carcass top to a side, is about £1.60. Bag of 50 costs 80 quid, so quite expensive per fitting. And there were 16 in in this bunket, so 25 odd quid's worth of £26 worth of fixings, which in the cost of the overall job is neither here nor there. But I'm not going to be using them on every job, that's for sure.
It's a nice option to have though, and a nice option to kind of have in your toolkit. And
absolutely, and the kit is very good. As with all these things, if you buy the starter kit, you get a bit of everything, which means you get a bit of things that you're not going to really want or not use. But overall, it's pretty good. The kit itself is about 300 quid, so not cheap, but it's got everything you need in there. It's got all the bits and pieces. So yeah, overall, reasonably good value for money. And certainly they do the job. The only downside with them, you get quite a large hole that you need to fill the domino fix and the lamello knockdown fixings. You just get a 6mm little hole to fill, whereas on the Domino connectors, I think it's about something like 12 or 14mm little cap that you have to cover. Everything in life is a compromise.
Yeah, exactly. Pros and cons, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we're at season 1, episode 10. We're at the
not quite end of an era, but end of a season. Yeah,
end of season. Blimey, and but
that's flown by. Oh, well, it's flown by for me. It might have crawled for you. It's probably crawled for the viewers, for the listeners.
Absolutely flown by. It's been fantastic, and 20 weeks. It's unbelievable how quickly that passes. I think it's a good opportunity to just say thank you to everyone for the support and the feedback that we've received over these 20 weeks. Is just absolutely, I think, blown both of us away. I just couldn't have imagined. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, we didn't start this to get praise, and nobody asked us to start this. This is just it's something we've both wanted to do for a while, but didn't have anybody to do it with, and here we are. We found each other, and I'm delighted with the way it's gone. I really enjoy the conversation. It looks like other people do too. I think I looked last night. 99 5-star reviews on iTunes.
I noticed that it was 98 the last time I looked, but there's a very reasonable chance that by the time this show actually goes out, that it'll have hit the 100 mark, which is just blowing us away. We've got 27 patrons on Patreon now, which is just absolutely amazing. We'll talk a bit more about that later on, but just absolutely fantastic stuff. And I think the general conclusion is we will be doing a season 2 no matter what, because we want to do a season 2. So
absolutely. I mean, we enjoy the conversation, and I would like to continue it. And if we're going to continue it, then hey, we might as well record it.
Exactly.
Maybe we need to cut down on the editing, and if it's not abundantly clear, Andy spends an awful lot of time editing the show to make us sound much more conversational than we actually are. And that's a tremendous amount of work. Partly because you are a bit of a control freak. Let's be honest.
I'm a total control freak. It was a kind of stipulation from day one that it'll be awesome to do the podcast, but trust me, if you end up editing it, I'm going to be coming back every 2 seconds. Can you just change that a little bit?
I thought.
I said.
Yes, I thought. No. I'll just hand all that stuff over to you.
More than happy to do that. So, but I thought, in fact, I think you might have mentioned that it might be an interesting thing to talk about. What's involved in making a podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've had a few questions from people who say, "Oh, I'd love to do a podcast, but I don't really know where to start. And I don't know where I'll find the time." And again, just as an aside, not to sound like one of those gruesome motivational posters that you see in sort of corporate offices, nobody finds the time. You've got to make the time to do this.
Yeah.
Whether it's a YouTube channel or whether it's your podcast or whether it's hobby woodworking, you've got to make time for this. What's involved then, Andy? How do you make your podcasts? And I'll tell you how I make mine.
I mean, when we first started this out, the very first thing that we did, ignoring all of the technical, I'll not go into setting up hosting accounts and all that sort of thing, because you know we could spend 5 podcasts just talking about that. There's many podcasts and YouTube channels out there telling you how to do all the technical stuff, but I'll keep it fairly high level. I mean, the first thing that we did is we set up a 20-week schedule for when we were going to record and publish every episode, because the first thing is when you're doing a podcast, it needs to be regular.
Yeah.
You know, you need people to know, it's coming out on a Monday morning every 2 weeks. And whatever the schedule is, you've got to stick to that no matter what.
Same with YouTube, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And once we decided on what that schedule was going to be, we then had to work out, okay, when are we going to record every episode? And we literally worked out the full 20-week schedule for recording and release.
Yep.
And that has to allow the time for us to actually just chat to each other, the time for editing, the time for doing all the other behind-the-scenes stuff, and then the time for when it actually gets released at 8 o'clock on a...
6 o'clock.
Sorry, no, at 4 o'clock on a Monday morning. Is it... I think I moved it forward to...
I think you moved it to 6, but
did I move it forward?
Around there.
I can't remember. Maybe it's 6 o'clock. Anyway, Monday morning.
And it's probably worth mentioning as well that, you know, although it ends up an hour-ish, we spend 2 to 3 hours chatting on a Friday morning or whenever to actually record this. At least half of which is trying to get Skype to work, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. And that's another whole story. But yeah, the actual recording of us just chatting, you might as well say a good 2 hours. Probably you might as well just say a morning is pretty much gone, because by the time you've finished and got yourself sorted out, it's pretty much lunch.
I can't get to a job on a Friday morning before midday, basically, or on a Friday morning that we're recording.
Yeah, exactly. So the tech stuff that has to be sorted out beforehand is things like your podcast hosting, your website hosting, because that's a different thing. A YouTube channel for the podcast, might talk about that later on. Domains, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.
Yeah, lots of social accounts to sort out and maintain.
All the gear that you need in terms of your mics and recording setup, doing all of your branding and graphics, which Peter's done all that side of thing, all that side of things for the podcast, and done an awesome job.
Coming up with a name as well, you know, got to have a name.
Yes. You had a good idea for a name, and I was like, yep, champion, that'll do. And so that's all kind of the behind the scenes stuff that you don't get to see, and that took, you know, probably a couple of weeks of work to get all that side of things up and running. It wasn't a huge amount of work.
Yeah.
Each little bit maybe only takes half an hour, you know, but there's a lot of it.
But half an hour here, half an hour there, or an hour there. We're trying to fit this in around the regular work that we're doing as well.
Yeah.
It all adds up, and it does take time. A lot of people get hung up and caught up in the actual physical recording, the gear that you're using. Whereas there's so that's the easy bit, you know. There's so much more to it than that. So much more going on behind the scenes.
I would say the one bit that we've not had to think about at all is the gear, because you already had a decent mic. I already had a decent mic. We were both already set up to do recording, and generally, other than Skype not behaving itself, the recording side of things is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
What we do, by the way, because a lot of people have said, "Oh, can we video it?" And it's like, well, Peter's in London, I'm in Newcastle. We're at opposite ends of the country to each other, and we record each end independently. And then part of the editing is that I knit it all back together.
Yeah. This is how you get the best quality, basically, because if you record over the internet, and although Skype is behaving itself extremely well today, if you record over the internet, it can be a bit laggy. It's not always great quality, whereas recording our own versions of our own audio locally and then, as you say, knitting it together afterwards, it's the way you get the best. It's
infinitely better quality. And you know, when you go to listen podcasts and you hear some that sounds like a recording of a telephone call,
the old biscuit tin trouble, isn't it?
Yeah. Versus ones where it sounds like you're in the same room as the people. That is the difference between recording both ends independently or just doing the recording through Skype or some call recording software. So
yeah,
and we'd kind of, and you know, my background is in audio recording, so I think we're both pretty set on, no, we want to do this to sound as good as possible, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
If we're going to do it. So the recording takes 2 to 3 hours, and then that's all edited down. The editing at the minute's taking about 4 hours per episode, but I'm trying to bring that down and be a bit less anal about it, you know. I think it's one of those things where when you first start out, you want to take out every single little and ah, and don't get us wrong, there's editing that has to be done because there's lag on the call due to the way Skype works. And that lag means that sometimes you talk over each other because you don't know when the other person's quite finished talking. And it's like that satellite delay thing.
Yeah.
And if that was left in, honestly, it would be painful for you to listen to. So I take all that lag out, and that's the thing that takes the time. Every time we are chatting and we accidentally talk over each other because of the lag. And that we're always going to have to sort that.
Yeah. And the huge benefit of recording separately like this, of course, is that we're on our own tracks. So you can time shift, you know, my speech to coincide with yours, or rather for us not to talk over each other. So that's the big benefit of having us on separate audio tracks.
Yeah, exactly. So once I've edited it all, I'd kind of master it and run it through some level maximizing software, which just brings everything up. It's basically a glorified compressor, but there's various plugins that run to take out any background noise. You know, there's noise gates, there's compressors on the individual tracks, there's EQ.
Yeah.
There's.
Do you know, I've never asked, but what software do you use?
I found a tip of this little piece of software called the Levelator.
Oh, right.
And it's completely unsupported, and it went out of being updated or anything, I think 4 years ago or something, I don't know. But it's out there on the internet and you can find it, and it's called the Levelator. You drag and drop a WAV file on it, and it just maximizes the volumes, and it does a really good job of it. You know, there will be better plugins out there that will probably do an even better job. Yeah. But as it is, this does a pretty awesome job of just kind of bringing everything up to the max levels without it being too noticeable.
Without blurring it. Huh? Fantastic. And so that's a plugin for what?
Oh, it's a standalone piece of software. It's just
oh, right, okay. So it's just something somebody's written and thought it'd be cool
It's almost just an executable, and you run it, and a little thing pops up on your screen. You drag and drop the WAV file on it, and it outputs a new WAV file that's all fixed. And it's called Levelator.
I bet it's PC only, isn't it?
There's a reasonable chance it's PC only, but I'm not sure. Yeah. And then, so ultimately, then I need to turn that into an MP3.
Because it's an MP3 that gets hosted, yeah?
It's the MP3 that gets hosted. So that's then turned into the correct MP3 format, and then given the correct file names and everything. And then that's what ultimately gets uploaded to the podcast hosting software.
And the podcast hosting software, other than keeping the files where they are, like a glorified Dropbox, what else do they do for us? Because we pay for this, and you know,
it's basically like YouTube, but for podcasts. It's designed for streaming audio. It's a service. Basically, you could put it onto your own web space if you wanted. If you've got a website, you could just upload it into a folder on your web space and link to that. But the likelihood is you'll quickly use up every bit of bandwidth that your web hosting package allows for. Because although podcasts use a fraction of the bandwidth of video, if you're getting a few thousand views a month, it still adds up.
Yeah.
And you don't want to get a situation where they just put a bandwidth cap on and no one can listen to your shows anymore. So you want to go, that's why you use a dedicated host. There's lots of hosts out there. We use Blueberry, but there's like Libsyn, SoundCloud. There's a bunch of other ones. SoundCloud
are an odd one, aren't they? Because I know early on we got asked quite a lot why we're not on SoundCloud. They're like a separate hosting outfit. With normally what happens is we put our podcast on Blueberry or wherever it is, and that then gets fed out to the various podcast players, whereas SoundCloud is a separate entity.
Ultimately, the podcast software produces an RSS feed of the podcast, and that's what your podcast app speaks to. So that RSS feed contains like all the show notes, the link to where the actual file is. And once your podcast app knows about that RSS feed, then it can play back the show. And this is why, and I'm talking to you, people listening on YouTube, you need to use a proper podcast app, because the only reason we put it on YouTube is it's kind of a final last resort route for people who haven't got a podcast app yet. But if you've discovered us via YouTube, get yourself a proper podcast app to listen to your podcasts on. I use Pocket Casts, which is awesome. What do you use?
I use Overcast, Overcast on iOS. Also, the podcast app on iOS is pretty good. I used Pocket Cast as well when I had Android. There's a whole host of many varied podcast apps out there, which are very straightforward to use. You just sort of typically do a search, and then either subscribe or just download. We'd like you to subscribe, obviously. Or just download an individual, or even just stream individual shows as you choose.
And once you're listening through a podcast app, a proper app, that then opens up the world of podcasting to you, because through that one app, you're going to be able to listen to podcasts that are hosted on pretty much anything, So you're going to be able to pick up podcasts that are on iTunes, on SoundCloud, everything. All the normal places where the podcasts get hosted, your app will pick those up. Whereas if you listen to a podcast in SoundCloud, you're only going to be able to listen podcasts hosted on SoundCloud.
Yeah.
SoundCloud can't be used as a client to listen our podcast because we're not hosted on SoundCloud.
No.
So if you're same goes with YouTube. If you listen to a podcast on YouTube, you're only going to be able to listen to podcasts who have bothered to upload themselves to YouTube. It's not a good platform for listening podcasts, really.
Exactly.
But we'll put it out there as a kind of catch-all solution just for people who haven't got into using apps yet. But honestly, get yourself a good podcasting player on your iPhone or on your Android device or whatever, and it will open up this giant world of podcasts, and you will never look back. It's to the point that I paid, I think, 10 quid for my app, and I'm so happy with it because it gives synchronization back to the desktop, so I can be listening a podcast in the office on my computer. I can walk away from the computer and pick it up on my phone. It'll pick up from the same point. And I can just literally just walk into my truck and drive off, and it'll just automatically start playing. I don't have to touch anything. And the act of me switching the radio on in the truck picks up the podcast from where I was last listening to, and it just continues playing. And for me, that's worth 10 quid.
Yeah, absolutely. There are plenty of free ones as well if you just want to dip a toe in the water to try it.
Oh, there's loads of free ones. Most of the free ones, there's loads of free ones that are really good. You're just probably going to have to put up with adverts popping up. But if that doesn't bother you, there's loads of free podcast apps you can use. Anyway, so yeah, and the Blueberry thing the hosting platform that we use, you get a plugin for your website, and then that basically allows you to just put a post on the website, and then that automatically uploads the podcast and does all the back end stuff for you. So if you get a good kind of combination of plugins and apps like that, it makes life so much easier later down the line because you've just got one button to click and everything's done.
Yep.
And then obviously we'll have to do things like writing the show notes, finding affiliate links, putting all that together. That probably takes a good 30 to 60 minutes per show between us, I would have said, putting all that together. I have to render a separate version for YouTube that has a logo in the background and has a thumbnail and all that. So that and then that needs to get scheduled to go out at the same time as the release. So that takes about half an hour to put that together.
And again, all the thumbnails and all the graphics, they were done back at the very start.
Yeah,
in advance. So these are all available, and we share these on a Google Drive. So that they're available to both of us and can be updated or changed.
Peter kindly put together everything for the whole season right at the beginning. That makes life so much easier because it means that I'm not having to pester him every 2 seconds. Oh, can you get the thumbnail?
Which is just as well.
Yeah, so everything was done right at the start. Part of that, when we're working out the 20-week schedule for the show, is also doing all that background work of putting together. Because you wouldn't believe how many different types of versions of the logo we'll have to have.
Yeah.
For every different platform.
Different one for Twitter, different one for Instagram, different one for Facebook, different ones for the website. You know, it's all different.
There must be 10 plus different versions of the logo just for all the different platforms that you've had to sort out. So so once that's all done, then everything's uploaded on the schedule. The upload takes half an hour or so to upload it to the internet, including the YouTube upload. And then on the day, so the launch is kind of automated. In other words, once we've set it to upload, I say make it go live at this time on a Monday morning, and then that's kind of it. Can you still hear me?
Just about. You're breaking up a bit, actually. Getting a bit choppy.
Gone. Oh, Skype's died. Can you hear? No, you've gone. Skype's died. You see, this is what gets edited out the show. I'm going to leave this in, though. No, I'm only hearing the beginning of words at the minute.
You're very laggy.
Should we disconnect and reconnect? Oh dear, it's completely died. Hello, hello, hello?
Hello, hello, hello.
Oh, I've got you.
Got audio but no video, but that's okay.
I've got video on your side.
All right, I've got you.
Hold on. Let me just try that. Can you see me now?
Oh, yeah, gotcha.
We're back in the room. So where were we up to?
Sticking around with Skype as always, you know.
So this is what the Skype thing, you know, we can have calls drop out 2 or 3 times per episode easily, not taking into account like lag and all that sort of thing, but yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we upload on the schedule, everything goes live, and so by a Monday morning, and I still get squeaky bum time every time on a Monday morning, it's like, has it gone live? And then, you know, you check and everything seems to be fine.
Yeah.
And then we have to do a little bit on social media just to get the message out there. And you do the Twitter stuff, I do the Instagram stuff.
Yep.
And that's basically it. We then just keep an eye on follow-up and try to get back to messages.
Yeah, keep an eye on the Twitter and all the other social things to see what sort of feedback we get.
And the way to get in touch is via Twitter and Instagram. The comments on YouTube, by the way, we do read all of them, but we're not replying to comments on YouTube because we don't want to turn that into a thing.
Another thing that we need to keep an eye on, yeah.
Yeah, because if you want to leave a comment, do it via Twitter or Instagram. Absolutely fine to leave the comments on YouTube, but you'll not get a response because otherwise it's kind of, you end up in that situation where you respond to some people and not others, or do we commit ourselves to responding to every comment on there on the platform that we don't want people to use because we'd rather use a proper podcasting app.
Yeah.
So it's kind of YouTube's there as a last resort, but please keep leaving the comments. It's lovely, but don't think that we're ignoring you. Well, we are ignoring you.
But for all the right reasons.
We're reading the comments, but we're not replying because it just opens up a whole can of worms. But we do generally reply on Twitter and Instagram. So and then obviously keeping an eye on email and that side of things as well. So
absolutely,
that's it in a nutshell. And I've worked out that it takes about 9 hours per episode. It's about 9 hours of work per episode between us to get an episode out there. And that's why at the minute we can't really commit to doing weekly, because bearing in mind that effectively, you know, we're kind of just about covering the costs of the hosting, but we're nowhere near covering the cost of the time that we're losing out of our day jobs.
No, I mean, just a morning every a couple of mornings every month is a effectively a day's money lost.
Yeah,
so
easily.
And again, we're not complaining about this. We're not asking you to feel sorry for us.
No,
this is just a reality. It's something we want to do. But the reality is there are costs attached to this.
Yeah. And if we ever get to the point where, I don't know, the sponsors or Patreon takes off to the point that we can't afford to take effectively another full day off work to do a weekly show, then absolutely, I think we would both love to do that. Yeah. But at the minute, we'll have to also kind of keep a bit of a reality check on it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. As much as we love doing it,
what I think, and it applies probably for both of us, what we wouldn't want to do is commit to weekly and then find out after 7 shows, it's like, this is absolutely impossible. We're just going to have to can the whole thing.
Yeah.
Whereas if we can just keep it ticking over every 2 weeks, I think for now that's working pretty well, and we'll see where it goes. We'll see where it goes.
I think so. I've had a couple of people say on Twitter, "Oh, when's the next one out? Is it It's like they're missing them, It's kind of looking forward to the next episode kind of thing, which is nice.
Awesome. Which is awesome. And one of the problems that we've got in terms of sponsorship is that in the UK, nobody's heard of podcasts. And we've spoken to manufacturers and they've literally said, what's a podcast?
Yeah.
So and then you're having to try and explain the whole business model of podcasts and stuff to people who have never listened to podcast.
The idea of a sponsor read and that sort of thing is completely alien to them. It is. It's interesting. It's fascinating. You feel like you're. It's part of our job is to educate social media experts. And think,
I had a manufacturer the other day saying, "Could we do an entire episode just dedicated to their product?" And it's like, that's not really how it works. Podcasts work. But it's purely because these, we're at the infancy of this in the UK at the minute, I think. But it's not complicated, but there's a lot of individual little steps that you've got to get right. And there's a lot of good information out there, but not a lot of stuff that kind of it's different on every platform. Like, for example, if we were hosting on Libsyn instead of Blueberry, the processes would be slightly different. And it's all a bit of a learning curve for the particular route that you've decided to go down, because there's no single guide that covers you for making a podcast, no matter what host you've chosen. If you choose SoundCloud, that's another different process for getting your podcast out there. But everything I've read about SoundCloud is that the platform itself is struggling a little bit. I don't know if it still is, but there was certainly rumours that SoundCloud is a struggling platform. And at the end of the day, it was never designed to be a podcasting platform. It was always kind of a upload your music and let people listen to your music platform. And they've kind of branched out into the podcast arena. But, the SoundCloud might be around for years and years and years, and they might sort things out. But, that's a whole nother episode.
Yeah, on its own. So when we first started doing our Patreon for the podcast, we set some goals, didn't we? We get X many, we get we go weekly, we get this many, we do a second season. And you suggested, I think, Andy, if we had 20 Patreon supporters, we'd do a second season. And if we get to 200, we'll go weekly. And I thought that was a bit low. I thought we ought to be aiming a bit higher than that. I said we ought to go for 50 and 500. And it turns out you were way closer to the mark than I was.
Well, we've hit 27 patrons, which is not a bad start.
Which is good. It's a good start. But I think we'll go with your original estimates for doing a second season rather than that, because obviously we do enjoy it, and we will do a second season of this.
Yeah, and thank you so much to those 27 folk who are literally keeping the lights on this show. That is the only source of income we've got to pay for what we're doing here is Patreon, and you are literally keeping the lights on. So thank you so much to every one of you. And yeah, we will be doing a season 2. And at the minute, we're provisionally saying Monday, the 11th of September, will be the episode 11. So the first one of season 2. And but keep an eye on our Twitter and Instagram just in case that changes.
Yeah, I mean, early September provisionally with the idea of the 11th. But, you know, subject to change depending on schedules and all the rest of it. But that's the plan. So, yeah, look forward to that. So we're taking the summer off, which would be nice.
Yeah. And we're adding in a new $3 reward tier on Patreon. And anyone who is on $3 or above will get a shout-out in the show until we change our minds.
Yeah, name check to anybody giving us $3 a month or more.
Yeah, $3 a month, and you'll get a quick shout out at the end of the show, and you'll get your name in the show notes as well.
Absolutely, unless you choose not to, of course. Not everybody wants to be recognised in that way. We would totally respect that. I've got a couple of Patreon supporters on the YouTube channel who've chosen not to have their name in lights at the end of the video, so that's absolutely fine.
But it's just a little thank you for coming in at that tier. Really, at that level, it's just fantastic, and that'll start from episode 11 onwards. So, one thing that I think would be quite a nice way to round off season 1 is for each of us to give a little tip. If you've got an idea of a golden tip for the end of season, for anything, it can be life-related, business, joinery, you know, anything you want.
This one works for everything, okay? Clean up after yourself.
It's a good tip.
Okay, that goes for life, relationships, business, joinery, working in someone's house, whatever it is, clean up after yourself. Don't leave your mess for other people to deal with. Sometimes when I'm in a customer's house, and it happened yesterday, actually, got around to fitting these little kitchen doors and things, and the woman said, cleaner's coming tomorrow, don't worry about the mess. I said, well, you know, the cleaner's not here to clean up after me, they're coming to clean up after you. They're cleaning your house, you know. They're not my cleaners. They're yours. So I'll tidy up my mess, get that out of the way, and it's an easy, simple thing to do. Sometimes it's harder at the end of a long working day to actually get your Hoover out and tidy up properly. But it's worth doing because it's those things, those little things, that really make the difference. Those things make you memorable, in my experience, anyway.
I think that's a great tip, and I completely 100% agree. I've had customers who have even said, just leave it, I'll do it later, I'm in all day, I'll do it. And it's like, no, don't worry, I'm quite happy just getting the Hoover out and cleaning up after myself, and it's just part of the job. Apart from anything else, I normally take pictures of the finished job, and I don't want pictures of the finished job with all the rubbish.
Exactly, and you don't want all the rubbish in there, yeah.
It's part of the whole pride in your work thing, isn't it? And no, totally, 100% agree.
What about you? What you got? My
tip would be always have an exit plan.
Okay.
And this was a tip given to me, probably about 15 years ago by a good friend. And it was back in early days of another business that I'd set up. Mm-hmm. And it was just a little thing. It was just a completely innocuous comment that he kind of dropped in over a pint.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I didn't really give it much thought, and I didn't really know what he was talking about. And he just said, Andy, just what you're doing is great. Always have an exit plan. And I was like, okay.
Okay.
And it just always kind of stuck in my head. At the point where you need to have an exit plan, you'll remember that and you'll think, I wish I had an exit plan.
Yeah.
And just all it takes, say, for example, you set up a joinery business and it turns into a joinery company and you end up employing staff. And eventually, at some point, you get to the point where you might not want to do that anymore. Like you want to retire or you want to start something else.
Yeah.
How are you going to do that? How are you going to get out of that business? And it doesn't have to be a detailed plan. It can literally be an idea in your head. It can be something that you scribble down on a post-it note. But just how would you get out of that business? Now, you can develop an exit plan to the nth degree and turn it into a full, how are you going to sell shares in the company? You can develop it to, and big corporations do this, and corporations of all size do this and do have exit plans as part of their formal business strategy. But it doesn't need to be anything like that. But just give it some thought. What happens next, and how do you draw a line under the thing that you're doing at the minute if you want to? And your exit plan might be, I'm never going to have an exit plan. And that's fine. For example, I don't have a particular exit plan for YouTube. But I could formulate something in my head fairly quickly. We could easily, if we wanted to, and I don't want to do this, but we could sell our channels to manufacturers.
Yeah.
There you go. It would have an instant following. It would probably die very quickly because people follow us
because of our charming personalities, of course. Yeah.
Because people love us. But people follow us because we've got a rapport and a bit of a relationship with the audience, Anyway, the whole point of the exit plan thing is, don't overthink it, but do give it some thought as to how one day you can get out of that thing that you're doing in a sensible way that's going to potentially give you some payoff, for the thing that you've built up. If you've built up a company that has happy customers and repeat customers and a reputation, that's worth something. That's worth potentially a lot of money. And you need to have a plan of how one day you're going to get your money back for that and how you're going to get out of it.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Yeah, excellent.
So, follow up. We've got a note here from Mike Chapman, who dropped us a quick email to contact@measuringuppodcast.com.
Splendid.
To say that he was out on his bike listening to the show and he was listening it on the bank of the River Exe in Devon. Beautiful part of the world.
Nice.
And he was just having a little breather while listening to the podcast, while having a little cycle around.
Lovely.
And awesome stuff. Thanks for that, Mike. Keep your notes coming in of where you're listening to the show. Have you got anything on your side?
We had a note from, I'm just looking actually, sorry. Give me 1 second. Yeah, we got a tweet from Mark Hanna. He says, loving the discussion on books. I wonder if you guys remembered a magazine series from the 1980s called The Knack. He says, browsing my dad's collection of these as a kid sparked my interest in all things DIY and making. It rings a bell, actually. It was one of these part works. So you get the magazine every week or every month or whatever, and it built up a reference book of DIY how-to manual kind of thing. It's actually published by Marshall Cavendish, and I used to do a bit of work for Marshall Cav when I was a photographer in the 80s. So I never actually worked for that magazine title, but I'd done some work for other titles within the company. I
used to get a Marshall Cavendish publication called Input.
Right. Is that an audio one by any chance?
No, it was a geeky computer programming one.
Oh, right.
I was quite into just mucking about on computers when I was little, and it was just this similar kind of thing. And you'd spend a day just typing in hundreds and hundreds of lines of code, and then it wouldn't work, or it would draw a box on the screen or something like that. But right, I'm sure that was Marshall Cavendish. I remember that back in the day.
Yeah. Happy times.
Yeah.
We had a question as well. I know you gave a shout out on Twitter before we recorded the last show. We had a question come in a little bit late from friend of the show, Keith Brown, Rag'n'Bone Brown. He said, if you could only ever use one grade of sandpaper, what would it be? Which is an interesting one. I'm and ahh'd about this for a while because it's such a hard thing to do because you've got to have one grit to go through everything. But I went for a P80, 80 grit, because if you use that for a week, it'll effectively become a P120, and you use it for another week, you get a P180, and it gets sort of gradually less effective as you get it. I was tempted to start with a 120, but there are some times when you need an 80 just to power through stuff. But that was there. I would start with an 80, P80 granite, and go from there.
I would completely agree. I think 80 grits are underrated, and you've got people battling away with 120s and stuff, and it's like, unless you're doing actual kind of fine furniture production and stuff where you're putting a finish on where you would potentially notice. Well, really, if you're wanting to get into the grades that are almost going to put a polished finish on the surface, which obviously you can get if you're really working up the grades.
One of the interesting things about having done some spraying is that one of the things you have to do, your finishing has to be that much better. A certain amount of roller rash would cover little discrepancies in your joinery before. And what I've found myself doing is even the stuff that I send out that goes out to be sprayed, I made a little tray and a side table for somebody. I'm tending to finish those to a better standard now, whereas before I always thought I was sort of doing them a favour by doing what I did, but actually wasn't really very good. Certainly not good enough for a sprayed finish. So I'm finishing to a higher standard. I'm going down to P320, P500 now.
Well, on MDF?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Really good.
And would you notice a difference between that and a P80 then, or on a sprayed finish?
Yeah.
Right.
Goodness, yeah. Yes.
So does that mean by doing a sprayed finish, the sanding takes much longer then?
Yeah, it does actually. It does take longer.
We'll end on that note.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. I'm just winding you up. So, any shout-outs? What have you been listening to?
I haven't been doing much of anything, to be honest. I've had my head full of catching up. I've got a load of videos to come through. And again, this is a huge mistake of mine to have ended up having two series running at the same time. On the same sort of job, so I'm trying to kind of combine those at one point. As I say, I'll finish the spraying one soon, and then I've got some other bits to do on the big job. So I haven't had a huge amount of time to look at anything else. But one thing that did come up again, Keith Brown, friend of the show, Rag and Bone Brown. I don't know if you've seen this, but he's got a no lathe bowl challenge out at the minute.
Yes, I'm doing it. Are you doing it?
I am. It comes up a really bad time because I'm going to be, not in the workshop very much over the next few weeks. But I'm definitely coming up with something for it. Yeah. Yeah,
I'm going to go for it. I mean, mine will be awful because I haven't got any tools for doing that sort of thing. But I have got a little piece of Spanish chestnut sitting around that should be perfect for it. So I'm going to give it a bash. But I think that'll be quite a fun thing.
Fun, nice.
Yeah, he was saying he's got potentially, I'll not drop any names, but he's got some potentially quite big names involved. But I'll not say who. Just watch Keith's channel, Rag and Bone Brown, awesome channel.
Yeah, great.
I've been chatting to him actually because last week I put out a video about biscuit jointer tips, which was a whole topic that we need to talk about at some point.
It'll be a monologue because I've never owned one, I'm afraid. But yeah,
you never had one. Interesting.
I tell a lie. I had one back before I was doing this for a living.
So you've always been Domino then?
Never really used it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, just to put the record straight, because it started blowing up. Some of the comments on it got very Domino versus biscuit jointer in the comment.
Oh dear, really?
Nothing kind of nasty, but it some of the comments got quite heated. And I just kind of left them to it,
Yeah.
And I would love a Domino, but I don't buy tools unless a job's going to pay for it. And I haven't had a job that I can't do with a biscuit jointer. But as soon as a job comes up where I can only do it with a Domino, and if that job will pay for it, I will buy a Domino. Simple as that. If I hadn't already bought a biscuit jointer, I would probably go straight to a Domino.
Yeah.
Probably, but that's a whole topic. But I have no allegiance to Dominoes or biscuits. It's just I happen to have bought a biscuit jointer several years ago, and that's what I mainly use.
Well, interestingly, you see, I bought the Domino. I got one when they first came out for exactly that reason. I had a job that would pay for it. if I didn't have a Domino now, I would probably be looking at the Lamello biscuit jointer that does the fancy fixings. Yeah.
Interesting. How much is the Lamello?
Oh, it's about 1,500 quid.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I should just bypass the Domino and go straight for that.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, maybe not.
Job done.
So what was it? Yeah, so I did this tips video about biscuit jointers, and because I'd put a video out there about biscuit jointer tips, YouTube threw up a video into my recommended watching, and I didn't realise that Keith had done a video where he'd done quite a detailed strength test on biscuit joints. And he actually proved that biscuit joints were weaker than having no biscuit whatsoever.
Oh, right.
Now, in the test that he did, and it was a really thorough test, we'll link to it in the show notes, great, really interesting one. And he was doing kind of butt end-to-end joints. And in almost every case, the joint was stronger with no biscuit.
Fascinating.
Watch the video, honestly, and it would be really interesting to see a similar test done with Dominoes.
Dominoes, yeah.
What I want to do at some point is, because he was doing end-to-end, so edge grain to edge grain.
Right.
What I'd like to, because I don't very often do edge to edge. It's normally edge to face where I'll be using the biscuit for like alignment of shelves or cabinet edges and stuff like that. So I'd probably like to put together an edge to face grain test at some point. I think regardless, are very, very handy for getting the alignment.
Yes.
More than anything else. But it's very interesting that if they offer zero benefit strength wise, even on edge to face grain, then that opens up a whole can of worms.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
But yeah, very interesting test that he put out there. But it just randomly, he did that video a year ago, and we were talking about YouTube randomness the other day.
Yeah,
that's the first time I've seen it pop up, and it's because I happened to make a video, or I happened to watch my own video about my biscuit jointer, so it's thrown up his into my feed, and that's how I found out about it. So YouTube's so random.
It is. We work so hard trying to organise and.
Oh, you've gone again. You've gone. Skype's died. No.
It throws up the most random, bizarre stuff.
You're back. Hello.
So yeah, YouTube. Yeah, we work so hard to try and sort of get the right stuff into our channel and try and organise it, and yet YouTube just completely randomly throws this stuff around.
It is. The AI of YouTube is
unfathomable.
But on that note, it's been a pleasure, everyone. Season 1 done and dusted.
It has. It's been an absolute joy. It's been a tremendous learning curve, certainly for me, and absolutely fascinating. Great talking to you.
It's been great. Oh, sorry, I missed out my pick of the week. My
oh, sorry, yeah.
The channel that I've been watching this week is a guy called Sean Tucker. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a photographer.
No, don't know.
And it all came about off the back of this whole need to be churning videos out on YouTube, which YouTube, it's very kind of self-pressuring to put out a lot of content, because if you don't, your channel quickly kind of gets dropped like a brick by YouTube, and you have to kind of build up that following again. And I found out, I can't remember how I found out about his channel, but he only puts out a video about once a month, and he has got something like 130,000 subscribers, and he's doing very well by putting out just one video a month, but they're beautifully shot, really, really nice videos, and it puts a very different slant on things. I'm not saying I'm going to switch to monthly videos instead of 1 or 2 a week, but I think his channel is a case in point that you maybe don't have to put out as much content to do well on YouTube.
They just have to be 4 times as good if you only do one monthly.
I mean, his videos are stunning, you know, but it's a very interesting.
I'll have a look. Never heard of him. So
Sean Tucker, and he goes into a lot of stuff that he kind of says like it for someone who understands Photoshop. I know the basics of Photoshop to make thumbnails and stuff like that, and I know what I need it to do. But in terms of like image retouching and lighting and color correction and all that side of things, but he goes into that arena and a load of other photography related stuff, and just really, really good channel. Whether or not you're into photography or making videos, I would highly recommend checking it out.
Excellent. I'll take a look.
So how do people find you, Peter?
People find me on Instagram at 10 Minute Workshop. They find me on Twitter at 10 Minute Shop, or on YouTube, 10minuteworkshop.tv. What about yourself, Andy?
And I am Gosforth Andy on Twitter, Gosforth Handyman on Instagram, and Gosforth Handyman on YouTube. So please do subscribe and follow both of our channels, and share the podcast joy around, and we'll push this to be the biggest joinery podcast in the world. I think we're safe to say we're probably the biggest one in the UK, but I think we're probably the only one in the UK.
Quite possibly, yeah. So, yeah, the biggest of one.
In terms of a commercial joinery podcast, I think. And maybe people know of other commercial joinery podcasts in the UK, and please do tell us.
Absolutely. We're taking the summer off from the podcast before season 2, but we will still be monitoring all the usual communication channels. Twitter is almost certainly one of the best ways, Twitter or Instagram, some of the best ways to reach out to us. But you can also email us, contact@measuringuppodcast.com.
Absolutely. Measuring Up PC on Twitter.
Thank you, yes.
And Measuring Up Podcast on Instagram. So please do get in touch on there, and it would be lovely to keep in touch with you all over this little break that we're having, and we'll see you in September.
Absolutely.
And we're going to finish this one really randomly, like we did on episode 1.
Probably.
There's nothing that we've forgotten to mention, is there?
I don't think so.